So I'd like to thank you, Dagmar, for that terrific introduction. And it's just great to be here with all of you today to discuss what is a truly important and complex issue. The title of this session is Elite Capture and Media as a Tool of Chinese Propaganda. I'd like to recognize a session partner, the International Visegrad Fund, right at the outset, and welcome everyone, and to my friends participating from the Czech Republic. Dobrý večer. We have a very brief time to discuss an enormous subject, and I'm so happy that we have such a great expert with us to do that. I'll just by way of introduction say that as China has become more engaged globally, it's become more influential in a number of sectors that are directly relevant to the health of democracy. And within this context, the news media is central to this question and is impacting democracies of all stripes. And this is not any different in Central Europe. Today, China's media reach is truly global, and the Chinese Communist Party's ambition to shape the information space is growing. The Czech Republic, for its part, presents an important case study, both due to the extent of the Chinese Party state's significant engagement there, but I would say also because of Czech society's pushback in a number of important ways to defend the integrity and independence of its democracy and the institutions within it. To discuss this challenge in the media context, I'm really very pleased that we have a terrific speaker joining us, and that is Kateřina Procházková, who's an analyst at the Synopsis project. Lukáš Valášek had been expected to join us, but unfortunately, he's unable to do so. So Kateřina is going to provide a presentation at the outset to frame these issues, and then we'll have a chance for her and I to speak a bit about these issues, and we'll also integrate questions from our participants. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kateřina for her presentation.
Chris, thank you very much for the introduction, Dagmar, as well. It's a pleasure to be here at the Prague Media Point. Let me start with my presentation. I will try to finish in 15 minutes. Please, if you have any questions, send them to our chat. We are going to check them, and if there are no questions, I'm going to continue with my presentation till the end. So now I will try to share my screen. If this is not working, I have some problems with the Zoom. I will ask the organizers to help me. So I think maybe are we? No, I'm not successful.
Kateřina, I would recommend to press play.
Okay. Can you see my presentation now? It's called Chinese Propaganda Spreading in Global Media.
Yes, we can see it very well. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I can start. So let me start with my presentation that is focusing on the Chinese propaganda. I was written over there. My name is Kateřina Procházková, and Chris forgot to say that I'm from the project Synopsis. So let me introduce also the project Synopsis, because I think it's a great thing that was established 5 years ago. Project Synopsis is a part of AcaMedia project. I will just jump. You can find our webpage, sinopsis.cz. We are also on the Facebook and on the Twitter. Why I'm going to talk about the Chinese propaganda spreading into media. I think Czech Republic can be a great example of what is happening right now. How is the Chinese propaganda, how is the Chinese party bringing alternative model of journalism that is against the Western values, against the Western orders. Very often they are talking about Western news, like about the fake stories or fake news, especially when we are covering Xinjiang, Hong Kong, or any news that are relevant to the Chinese party and they want to control them. Chinese propaganda and global propaganda campaign was set up probably 10 years ago. In 2003, we have a first information about the media warfare campaign that was a part of PRC People's Republic China military strategy. Later on, 2009, China announced it would spend approximately 6.6 billion US dollars on strengthening its global media presence. The first target was Africa, where they had their first CGTN branch. This is a Chinese global TV network. Later on, they spread into the Europe and, of course, other Asian cities as well. Maybe you heard about some projects that are part of the digital Silk Road or Silk Road, or you may know the abbreviation OBOR or OBOR or BRI. That is not just about a transmission of a signal, but it's more about a spreading in news and controlling in news. Global propaganda campaign significantly intensified under the Secretary General Xi Jinping. There's a famous quoting that said, to tell Chinese story better. That means that there is a new, more sophisticated strategy than was before. I called it time dark past because I remember at the time I was in Beijing, and at the time when we were watching BBC or CNN, your TV could just turn black, or you bought a magazine, Economist, and we were missing some pages and articles that were not articles that the Chinese or foreign readers should read in China. So now it's sophisticated, using the latest technologies and working with foreign journalists. That's important thing. Party or China has a special strategy how to involve foreign media and foreign journalists into their propaganda and become more visible in the global media. We'll talk later a bit more about the Czech media. They are foreign journalists working for Chinese media. Some of them are saying that the work is more about research or reporting for Chinese officials, or they are feeling that they are providing some kind of low-level intelligence for government, or Chinese government. These are the quotes of journalists who are working for CGTN branch in London. China has a special diplomacy association, or China Public Diplomacy Association, that is a platform for training foreign journalists. 500 Latin American and Caribbean journalists were signed into this training program. 1,000 African journalists should finish this program in 2020. There's a famous quote, and actually it's my headline: borrowing a boat to go out to the ocean. It's a quote of Xi Jinping, and it's well known. And maybe I should explain some of you what that means. It's about borrowing boats, that mean foreign media outlets, to go out and spread the Chinese propaganda. So this saying was quite popular, I would say 5 years ago, but now it's changing. And how's Jack Ma, the owner of South China Morning Post, quoted in his newspaper, South China Morning Post, he said it's not anymore about borrowing boats, it's about buying them outright. So that's what the Chinese are doing these days. They are buying media outlet, media houses, and trying to infiltrate as much as they can into the media world. Why I found it so scary? Here's a very interesting article and research done by the International Federation of Journalists that I will highly recommend it to those who would like to read more about China's story and reshaping the world's media. They have examples of what is right now happening in foreign medias, how they are cooperating, bought, co-opted by PRC. They have a very interesting chart that you can maybe see. They were searching in countries or percentage of countries where China has visible media presence. So mostly these countries are, how you can see, big countries, repressed countries, countries with ineffective government, developing countries, or countries that are part of the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative project. Go through this because I found this report very interesting. It was done by a journalist from European countries, and there's, for example, interesting info about Afghanistan. That in Afghanistan, Xinhua, the Chinese new agency, has contract or memorandum of understanding with 25 media outlets from 30 Afghan media. This is Afghanistan. Okay, let's go to Europe. They are also mentioning the cases in the European Union, for example, Portugal. There are 4 joint ventures or 4 Portuguese media houses owned by the PRC right now, the main media houses owned by the Global Media Group. So this is quite interesting, but I have to run. So Chinese media everywhere. What kind of media we can see infiltrating into our Western media? China Global TV Network. I already mentioned that, known under the abbreviation of CGTN, previously CCTV. And then we have a state news agency, Xinhua, that's very active, or maybe you can know it under the name News China. China News Service, again, state news agency, and China Radio International, well-known, broadcasting in 50, maybe more, 52 languages, or having office that is covering 52 states. People's Daily, Overseas, or Global Times are well-known newspaper. They are sometimes given for free to people in Africa or some European country as well. So these are the Chinese media that are very important. And why? What is happening with them? Of course, they are trying to cooperate with the foreign media houses. They are signing, they are cooperating with the journalist unions. They have some content sharing deals. They have training programs in the People's Republic of China. Chinese counterparts are paying journalist trips to China. They have trips for senior journalists. There is some kind of participation at forums in China as well. So this is everything. This is happening with the cooperation with them. I will maybe talk a bit more about the structure of Chinese media in the Czech Republic. What I found out, and this is my research, is I would divide this Chinese media in the Czech Republic into 5 groups. The first one are the Chinese media that are in a Chinese language, mostly for Chinese diaspora. The well-known is Jiehua Dongshen, Czech China Journal, that is published by the European Chinese Media Association. The owner and editor here in Czech Republic is the second most important Chinese businessman in the diaspora in Czech Republic. Chinese media for foreign audiences that I already mentioned, CGTN, CCTV, or Xinhua, are very well penetrated into the Czech media, for example, to literární noviny, info.cz, but I'm going to talk about it later on. Then we have the media that are owned by Chinese or co-owned. For example, Empresa Media, a company that was co-owned by CFC after they had a problem and they bankrupt. This share was taken over by the CITIC. Next group is some kind of cooperation and partnership, memorandums of understanding. For example, what I found out, Czech TV is of course buying content and cooperating with Reuters news agency. And Reuters is sharing their content and also for free using a content given to Reuters by CCTV. Why is it so scary? I was really surprised how many young Czech journalists were not able to distinguish what is the paid propaganda content from CCTV and what is the content owned and produced by Reuters. So this I found really dangerous. The last way of cooperation, I would say it's on business basis. They are mostly supplements or advertisements in Czech media. For example, Právo Daily, it's a well-known newspaper having these supplements quite often. When I'm talking about the supplements, it's not just Czech Republic. Here we go. There's a wonderful graph by Guardian where they were trying to cover all supplements or paid advertisements that were published in foreign well-known newspapers. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, LA Times, Le Figaro, Le Soir, Mainichi Shimbun. All of them are sometimes having these supplements. You would say, why not? This is paid or stay sponsored insert. Yeah, that's not a problem if it's properly mentioned. Here, the Irish Times, we can see this content is sponsored by the Embassy of China in Ireland. So there shouldn't be a big issue with this. But what is happening in Czech Republic? I will show you the Právo newspaper that I mentioned before. This is a supplement that was published last year. And I would say you can't distinguish that this is a paid supplement or advertisement. There's small, for those who can read Czech, there's a title, thematic and commercial supplement, but it's quite small. Then the articles are usually signed by names of the well-known journalists working for his journal. It's not graphically different or distinguished. So I found this one as quite striking example of how Chinese can cooperate with Czech newspapers. This one is a bit older. This is supplement of Právo again, 2017. What is interesting, both of these supplements, they were usually 5 up to 7 pages big, and they were always starting with an interview with the Chinese ambassadors. At the time, this one was Madame Kateřina. The previous one was the Chinese ambassador Chang Tieming. So this is happening. I mentioned literární noviny, which is a very interesting case. Literární noviny are very old Czech newspapers or magazine. They started in 1918, if I'm right. For some Czechs, they are still perceived as high quality reading, mostly focusing on culture and literature. But they signed a memorandum of cooperation with a Chinese outlet, and right now they have a special column called Reading China Plus. Okay, why not? They are mostly using news from the CGTN or from Xinhua agency, focusing on nature, culture, traveling. So nothing so scary. But what they are also producing these days and publishing are the official press release of the Chinese embassy. It seems like an article, but not. This is the official press release from PRC embassy in Prague. There is, of course, more behind this. These are the taboos that I should mention, but maybe if you have a time. But why are these media outlets doing that? Why are they cooperating and why the Chinese want to have their fingers into the foreign medias? Firstly, they are not so successful in spreading the Chinese propaganda itself. They have a problem with the language, they are culture barriers. So of course they are looking for well-known local names, well-known authors. Then of course the article or the message can have a bigger impact. Some of them I'm writing here are co-opted or paid authors. Some of them are working for co-opted media. Of course, these people, these locals, they know how to serve the only true to locals. They know how to manipulate the information, what to add, how to work with this. I should maybe mention also that the recent cases that I was studying, these are the information coming, the propaganda and fake news coming and covering COVID-19 pandemic, which is very interesting. The Chinese propaganda is coming to the Czech Republic through the Russian disinfo platforms, and here in Czech Republic is very well spread again through the disinfo platforms and medias. So yes, how to serve the only truth. There's also cooperation with local companies on sharing PRC propaganda. That's a very interesting case here in Czech Republic, company called PPF or Home Credit that had some interest and cooperation with the Czech media outlet Info.cz. But it's another case. Maybe Lukáš, if he would be here, he could talk about this because this was his research. But why are the foreign media so eager to sign such contracts and cooperate with the PRC partners? Money talks, of course. They are solving their financial problems that are hitting all the media houses, or let's say most media houses these days. Then, of course, the co-production. They want to have access to the large audience, especially Chinese market. You can see that in the film industry, in the production houses, and then the cooptation, the political influence. So especially media that are connected to the political parties, or how I mentioned before, PPF or Home Credit, if they have their businesses in China, that can be the explanation.
And Kateřina, maybe
I should finish. Yeah, sources of
we have a couple of questions. Yeah.
Yes. So okay. So I'm leaving my presentation, and I hope that I will be okay. I'm back.
You are back, and it was a great presentation, and it's an enormous amount of food for thought. I have about 100 questions that come to mind based on what you've shown, but I think what I'd like to do is there's a question that was posed that is really central to the discussion and how we think about these things, and it comes from Sophie Janusz, who asks, how should we think about the impact of these activities and Chinese media capture in particular? Because you've described what, in my view, is just a fantastically comprehensive and ambitious effort. But then I think the next question is, how should we understand, for example, in the Czech case, what sort of effects that's happening? Is it actually achieving whatever the understood ambitions of the leadership in Beijing may be, and their surrogates in this effort? And maybe you can just say a quick word about that. And then relatedly, if you wouldn't mind, also, what sorts of steps do you see being taken to adapt the approaches that China has used in the media space? You just listed all of these incredible examples, and you get the feeling that there's an element of adaptation going on. But I wonder if you could just say a word about that as well.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So the first question, why there is a Chinese, why they are Chinese trying to spread their propaganda and their news? Firstly, how I said, they are trying to bring alternative model of journalism. That means that is against the Western values, against Western orders. That it's quite important. Maybe you heard about a different approach to human rights. That China is promoting right now different approach to human rights. The word human rights are different, and Chinese should have a different approach to this. So these are important things, like to destabilize the Western values. And when we are talking about it, I can see that here in Czech Republic, especially during the COVID pandemic, the disinformation coming from China that are about COVID-19 are very well spreading in Czech society. I think around 10% of Czech society believes, actually I have it in my presentation, but I think I skip it, believes that the China help us to fight and is helping us to fight the COVID-19, not European Union and not the Western countries. the truth is that the PRC was the country that we were dealing, and we had more like commercial transactions. We were buying goods, face masks, tests from them, and from European Union we were getting the things for free. We had donations, and a Czech audience, it's very well. It's the Chinese propaganda that is spreading, and a Chinese audience, Czech audience, it's quite manipulated by this. I mentioned before the disinformation scene, and we can see that when we are looking at the Czech disinformation scene, Sputnik, Parlamentní listy, all of them are using Chinese propaganda as like a basic info that, of course, they are twisting a bit and using for the Czech audience and serving it to Czech audience. So
I think that that's terribly important, Kateřina. And another questioner emphasized this question, which was, is this really making any practical use for the Chinese authorities? And I think your example of the COVID-19 framing is a very good one, and it's very up to date. And I think it's an important question because it's often the case that people will say, observers will say, well, sure, they're investing a lot in media platforms and all these different arrangements and agreements, but is it actually having any meaningful effect? And so I think your example is a very important one.
Czech Republic is a really great example of this. So please, if you would like to see the numbers, the STEM research done by the Czech company, Czech social research company STEM, did wonderful research on that, and Czechs are really very well manipulated by this information about COVID coming from China.
And maybe I would just follow up on another point that you made relating to the in some ways understandable reasons that commercial media enterprises may be attracted to some sort of cooperation when there's significant money involved, or perhaps opportunities to reach large markets or audiences. But I wonder, in the Czech case, as far as you understand it, as Czech society has become more sensitized to some of the risks that come along with the ostensible benefits, and I think you and your colleagues have also made incredibly valuable contributions in helping people understand the often very modest extent of Chinese investment in the Czech Republic when compared with, say, Taiwan or other such countries. It's not often quite as much as people may believe. I think that's an important insight. But nevertheless, have you seen the leadership of news organizations in the Czech Republic come along with Czech society? Are they more cautious today about these arrangements, or maybe do a little bit more due diligence, or is that a little bit removed from the general cautious response that the society as a whole may have?
I would say yes. The last 4 or 5 years, Czech media the Czech journalists are really are doing better research, are more aware of this Chinese propaganda and Chinese infiltration. We could see that if there would be Lukáš Valášek with us, I think Aktuálně is a great example what is happening. Also, they are cooperating with us, with sinologists, asking for things, trying to verify things, doing their investigations. So I would say the situation is quite good. But again, these are some media outlets for probably 50% of a Czech audience. Then you have a tabloid, then you have the disinformation scene that is very active. And to these people, I don't think that this information could easily target. So we are trying to do our best, and I would say Czech journalists are doing a great job from the Czech radio, Czech TV, Aktuálně. But again, disinformation scene, tabloid are, I would say, lost.
And for some of our participants who may not be so familiar with some of the recent controversies connected to Aktuálně, maybe you could just say a word about the key lessons that were learned from these unusual interventions that were made there.
Yes, Aktuálně, I think Lukáš Valášek got a few awards recently, like the Křepelka, which is the word for the best journalist in Czech Republic. He opened at least 4 very important cases where he was investigating Chinese interference. The first one was about the Czech company, Czech lobbyist company called CNB. It was paid by the Czech business organization. I mentioned it before, PPF or Home Credit. They are very active in China. So this company, the lobbyist company, CNB, owned by Mr. Yersa, was trying to change opinion on China. They paid a project called Sinoscope, run by the sinologist Vít Vojta. They paid to some Czech journalists to publish articles written by them, of course, in favor of China and their Chinese business. So, of course, they were also monitoring some Czech politicians and working with politicians. So that was, I would say, one of the biggest cases that Aktuálně investigate and uncover last year, if I'm right. So if you have a time, check that. I think a few of these articles are even translated into English. Recently, there was a very interesting investigation done again by Aktuálně and Lukáš Valáček. We are cooperating on that, so I think I can mention that, and Lukáš is not going to be angry with me. It was the investigation about, we call it assassination as the heavy price for visiting Taiwan. There was a Swiss-based entity that contacted the Czech news website Aktuálně, and they were suggesting them to publish accusation that the head of the Senate, who recently visited Taiwan, that he received millions from Taiwan in exchange to his recent visit to the country. What was interesting, this entity was well known, connected to the United Front. They were a Chinese group of Chinese and Swiss business people, very well connected and working for PRC. Lukáš, with our cooperation, was able to do the investigation of find out the connection between this group and uncover that. Interesting thing is that the Chinese newspaper later on published article about great journalist Lukáš Valáček and this article, and twisted that, and they wrote that the Czech media uncovered the truth about Vystrčil taking bribery. So Chinese propaganda is working very well. They are very well connected, and we can see it. Something is publishing in France. Later on, there's a Swiss company is involved. It's not Swiss company. It's connecting to PRC. It's about the Czech politician, and later on you can read about it in Chinese media. So we should be really aware about what is happening right now around us.
So I know we're rapidly coming to the conclusion of this session. It goes very quickly, especially when the issues are so vast and fascinating. So I'm going to do my best to just wind the last 2 questions to combine them together. And I pose this question by saying, I think it's really important to emphasize that journalists like Lukáš Valáček and others like him are incredibly courageous, because there's an enormous amount of personal and professional pressure and even risk, even in open societies. And I follow these issues fairly closely, and I'm aware of similar sorts of pressure, whether it's in the form of lawfare or abuse of the legal system or physical threats to journalists all over the world that are a part of these efforts. And so I think that's very important to keep in mind. And so one of the last 2 questions, if you care to address them briefly, is maybe just to touch on this issue of the risks that journalists and civil society professionals face, and perhaps risks that even you and your colleagues may have faced at Synopsis. And then relatedly, on this larger global question, one of the questioners had asked whether you have any thoughts or can direct them to research or information relating to China's engagement in the media sphere in the Middle East, which is largely a closed media area. But nevertheless, my understanding is I don't follow it so closely, but I believe that China has increased its engagement in that sphere over time. And so if you would mind touching on those issues very quickly as we wind down, and then I'll hand things back to Dagmar and Jeremy Drucker.
Thank you for the questions. The first one, of course, Synopsis members, me as a journalist, or the team of our sinologists, we are facing some lawsuits from a Czech company connecting to PRC. I mentioned PPF before. We felt the pressure coming from the Chinese embassy here in Prague. We heard that all of us, we are already on a blacklist, or something which is called blacklist. So we can't travel to PRC right now, even to Hong Kong, which is for some of the sinologists quite big problem. But Lukáš, I can say if they have any threats, or how is he feeling about it. I would say I was expecting that. I spent 10 years in China as a foreign correspondent, so I knew what is going to happen if I will start to dig and do this research and talk about it and inform. So for us sinologists, it's quite normal, I would say. So it must be more difficult for Czech journalists who are facing this for first time. And the second question about the Middle East, I think some information about the Middle East, it's in the report of International Federation of Journalists that I'm Dutch. Honestly, I'm not focusing on that. I'm more covering Europe, European Union, especially Czech Republic. So I'm sorry, I don't have any precise numbers or cases.
So I'm going to take this opportunity to express my great thanks to Kateřina Procházková for just a terrific discussion. I think we covered a remarkable amount of ground in a remarkably short period of time. And so I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the terrific questions that everyone posed. And now I'm going to hand it back to Dagmar Kaspe.